wanted you to know how wonderful things.
This is the Loud Family, UnShattered. You're back! So are we. Thank you for tuning in again to the Loud Family UnShattered. I'm Grant Loud here with Tina Lee.
Hello.
And, of course, Ben Davidson.
I love seeing you guys.
It's good to see you, too.
I like hearing you.
Yes.
We're going to talk today a little bit about the year of silence between the end of taping and the beginning of the media storm that overtook us when the show finally did premiere.
Yeah, and what a storm it was.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, it surprised everybody.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one where at the end of the conversation, Grant, you're like, we can keep going. We got more to say.
Well, in preparation for these conversations, I read through a lot of the original pieces that were passed around in the New York Times and Newsweek and Time Magazine, and it's hard to dip back into some of that.
Yeah.
It was so personal, and only occasionally does a writer say, does this really mean anything to me, or is this like me? I mean, in the Anne Roythe piece, she says for a second, she has a little self-awareness that this reminded me a little bit of my life, and then she reverts to all of her homophobic comments about Lance.
Yeah.
Did you guys feel like at the time while it was happening, like just deer in headlights at this response?
Not deer in the headlights. We panicked.
Yeah.
I mean, we were running. We were. It was horrifying.
Yeah.
It was just waking up one morning to the whole world being changed and everybody being shockingly critical of us in a really deeply personal and dismissive way. When they finished filming in January of 1971, they just disappeared and it was just silence. Just. Did that ever happen?
Was that a dream?
Yeah, the winds blowing through the house, nothing left but gaffer's tape and blown fuses. And you're thinking, yeah, that did happen,
You're
right?
like, what's that noise? Silence.
I can't hear the camera in my ear anymore.
Yeah, this to me felt weirdly kind of like the breakup episode between you and the show. And you like kind of... Because there was this U-turn that everything takes with this media coverage about the show that you guys really didn't expect.
No,
and I think that's where the word betrayal starts to feel more real, right?
Even Kevin uses the word betrayal.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of what it felt like? Like it was just a shock, right?
Yes. Yeah, a total about face. We thought that this was going to create a conversation about universal shared experiences. And so suddenly to be confronted with this thing that was just about us, that was something that none of us in our naivete were prepared for.
Like you couldn't have imagined that would have been an outcome.
We never thought that we'd be just trying to defend ourselves.
Right.
Well, you said there was like a lack of prep, right?
There was no prep at all.
So don't you think it's like a failure on maybe PBS's...
You said that, Ben. I didn't.
I mean, but it's shocking to me that they wouldn't at least prep you guys for like good responses or anything like that.
Honestly, I don't know what was going through anybody's head because this goes into the publicity as well. Every time we turned to Craig, he'd say, I don't have anything to do with that. We turned to Susan. You have to fight your own battles. I couldn't do anything. Well, who do we talk to about that? Who's our person? And so everything that we had was focused on our relationship and our trust that we built up with Craig Gilbert. And suddenly he wasn't the guy in charge anymore. And the people that weren't available to us. So we had no recourse to talk to anybody. There wasn't a phone we could pick up and say, where did this come from?
Yeah.
So like when you go on like the Dick Cavett show, PBS isn't involved in that at all.
We were doing that because we felt that we needed to address how we were represented in the media.
Yeah.
But in fact, we were actually just going on and providing more publicity for this show, which really they never did anything to look out for us, to protect us, to prepare us, to honor the promises that Craig made.
I mean, it's crazy to think that any show today if their whole cast of that show was going on a talk show,
Yeah.
that the the production company or the person,
Yeah.
the people that own the rights to that show aren't going to be involved at all in that. Wouldn't they be worried about what you guys were saying, all this stuff? Like it's crazy to me.
It kind of speaks to the wild west nature of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a different time. This
Yeah.
is 50
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
and now everyone knows better, kind of, right?
Yeah.
So, Grant, one thing I did want to ask you about, because we talk a little bit about some of the fallout of relationships that have happened, like in production, and then certainly as this media circus is blowing up. I'm wondering, like, did you ever reach out to Craig Gilbert, to kind of get some resolution around this before he died, and B, Alan and Susan Raymond? You guys talk some about the fallout of relationship there too. Maybe talk a little bit more about that.
I actually maintained kind of a peripheral friendship with Craig for about a year and a half, 2 years after it. He was the kind of person that I really responded to. And so we had some correspondence. But at that point, I didn't realize, and as you know, we didn't realize until only this series of conversations, how much he had misled us. So I had confronted him at one point in the late 80s. We were involved in a panel discussion at the Museum of Television and Radio in New York. And he was there, and we talked about it a little bit. And at the end of it, I grabbed him and said, Craig, I'm sorry that there's all this bad feeling between us, but, we really depended on you to look out for us, and you disappeared. And he looked at me and gave me this look of just saying, I accept what you're saying. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain himself, but he just nodded and he walked on. And that was the most I ever got out of him. As I've said, I think in an earlier conversation, my relationship with Alan and Susan was not very good anyway, and it fell apart certainly in the aftermath of American Family Revisited, the 10-year thing. So I didn't really ever have much of a conversation with them at all. Throughout the years, they have spoken regularly about the show and about what they did. We have taken objections to that because they speak for us, which we don't like. We're certainly glad to hear anything that they have of their own reactions to their situation during the program. But when they say, well, I think Grant would do this, or I think Michelle would do that, that's crossing a line that has been very unwelcome. And they've gotten us into trouble a couple of times. So I've tried having some correspondence with them, but it's usually angry, and they think that I'm crazy, and I don't really blame them. It's just, but it's hard when you're trying to say, listen, just stop talking about me. Just do it. I don't want to be in your film. I don't want that.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, we're photojournalists and we can do whatever we want. And that can create a very, very loaded dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, this week's conversation is a fascinating one. I think especially trying to put myself in the shoes of 50 years ago, what it must have been like to be the attention of so much media, think pieces, major news outlets talking about you. I think a couple of times you mentioned that you felt like you guys were a freak show. Like it wasn't today's climate where we're used to reality TV or like real world type of storytelling. And so people didn't know what to do with you.
Yeah.
You go on
Yeah.
their show, you
Yeah.
go in for an interview, and they're like, what do we talk about?
Yeah.
What does the monkey do? Can the monkey eat a banana? Oh my
Gosh, it just sounds.
I don't blame them.
it
They were
sounds
confused.
crazy. Yeah. It sounds.
And to have had no preparation at all for knowing what their plan was,
Yeah.
or their strategy, or what their publicity was,
Yeah.
or their media, relations.
It was all unprecedented.
Yeah, we were just thrown into this whirlpool.
Yeah.
Without swimming lessons.
Like the first monkeys into outer space.
Yeah. Press the red button. Get a banana.
Yeah. So anyway, fascinating conversation to come, and we're glad you're still with us, guys.
Tina, do you know where people can find us?
Ben, I'm glad you asked. To leave any questions and comments, we've got our Facebook group at the Loud Family, and we're on Instagram at Loud Family UnShattered. And keep telling your friends and family about this podcast.
By all means, and continue to contact us and let us know if there's anything that you have questions about or anything you'd like to know more about, because we can talk. As you might have noticed, we are available to talk. Thanks, everybody. We hope you enjoy this episode.
All right, guys. Welcome to the
Hello.
Loud Family Unshattered conversation.
Here's the Loud Family Extras back
Yes,
at it.
about the media, which is a big one. Before we get into that, I did want to ask, we talked a lot about your parents' divorce last week. I just wanted to give kind of last thoughts about that, opportunity to share. We didn't talk extensively about whether or not you guys have an opinion about filming the show and whether the actual act of doing that influenced their decision to actually split up.
Right.
Divorcing my dad was like walking off a cliff. It was one of the most painful things that she ever had to do. So she just made a choice and did it. And I'm sure she would have rather the film crew not be there, but I don't think it influenced her either way.
Either way, she was going to get a divorce.
Yeah.
Whether the camera crew was there or it was after the boys graduated from high school, I really think she would have done it sooner or later.
It's like a matter of time.
Yeah.
And she talks about the fact that they had kind of a truce going throughout the filming. That was one of the things that they had agreed upon before they started doing the filming. Was let's just hold it together for these few weeks while this is happening. And then as it went on, and Dad continued to behave in an outlandish manner, and just really kind of rubbing her nose in it. And then she also, as I say, had the support of everybody on the production staff. It did make the process seem to make more sense and gave her, I think, the courage to just let it go.
Pull the plug. Yeah.
And I think poignantly to Michelle's point, it really was like jumping off of a cliff for her.
Yeah.
She was raised Catholic. She was very dedicated to the family circle of love. And to make that decision at that time of her life, being a homemaker, not a career person, being beautifully educated and wondering where she is going to go after she pulls the trigger. It took a lot of strength to make that decision.
It just seemed like the only choice that she had. So to keep the family together, I mean, we were still very close with my father. So
and she wanted as much harmony in the home as possible, and there was not harmony in the home when they were there together, with or without cameras rolling.
What were you going to say, Kev?
Well, I was just going to say that I was surprised at how financially vulnerable she seemed. I rewatched the whole series, and there was, towards the end of it, she was having a cocktail party with some friends, and she said, well, I'm not worried. I'm not going to starve because my mom's going to take care of me if I need it. I was thinking, oh my gosh, she's thinking that extreme.
Wow.
I never thought that she had even contemplated that type of financial difficulty.
she had 5 hungry kids that she had to feed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I think those previous 2 years, Dad's business had been in very serious trouble, and that was part of what really had her at the end of her rope. Was that she never really knew when he was coming home. She didn't know where the money was coming from, how much there was. She did have to feed a family of 5 every night.
It was stressful
On
the relationship too. It was stressful.
Yeah.
And she got a lot of support from the staff, but talking to Dad years later, you can kind of see his point of view. I mean, he grew up, suffered through the Depression, World War II, Korean War, fought hard, worked hard, made a business. And he got to a point in time that he didn't think there was anything. He wanted to have a little fun. He didn't think he was harming anybody, and he just wanted to have a little fun. And she thought it was horrible. And
because
there was a big dichotomy.
That opportunity was not available to her. She couldn't go and do. She was the one at home taking care of the kids, driving everyone around, cooking for everybody. She didn't have anything else going on.
Well, not if you read her book. She has a little something else going on.
I think that was later, right?
No, that was.
I think that was a little revenge.
Yeah. They were doing very adult things there in the early 1970s.
Yeah.
Lemon Tree Hotel was busy.
Yeah.
So was that El Paseo. Woo! It's not just for lunch, folks.
All right. All right. Well, appreciate just the last thoughts there. And we can shift gears for this week's conversation into talking about what happened after. So the last day of filming was December 31st, as you guys had mentioned before, New Year's Eve party, 1971. But the show doesn't air until January of 73. So there's a full year in between. I thought maybe you guys could just talk a little bit about how everything ended up wrapping with the production.
Alan and Susan Raymond talked a lot about how depressed we were after the divorce and that we weren't doing anything and there was nothing for them to film. We had very decidedly a one-way relationship with them. They were a good audience. They'd give you a wink and they'd laugh if you did something funny, or they'd encourage you, they'd egg you on a little bit. At a certain point, I think we all just got very good at avoiding them and avoiding doing anything that would cause them to pick up a camera and follow us around, because it was too much.
It was like we kind of matured to the relationship. You know, when we first started, it was like, oh, these are great friends and everyone's having a great time, and this is a beautiful relationship. And then by then it's like all that's important is getting the shot. We kind of matured to the whole thing and kind of soured on it by that point in time.
I mean, we got kind of tired too of being in the house and not being able to live in the house. If we were in another room, like friends were over, we had to be quiet. It just was there was too many people in that house all of a sudden.
And that house was totally wired. Totally wired. They had microphones all over the place.
Right. Yeah, light bulbs. I
mean, Gray and I could be down in our room by ourselves and talking, and it could be recorded.
Yeah. And don't get on the phone because they're going to plug in.
They're going to jack in.
Apparently, I know.
How did they decide on
so
that?
Embarrassed.
How did they decide when to end filming then on that last day of December?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I think it
ran out of money.
He ran out of money.
Ran out of money, and literally it was New Year's Eve and the party was over. Literally and figuratively. It was just like, okay, there was a little lull there. It's over now. Let's go out with a celebration. And
the balloon went up, the monkey died.
Right.
So then everything wraps end of December. You've got a whole year before the show actually hits the air. What did you guys do? What happened in that year between taping and airing?
Well, I was in 8th grade, and then when it aired, I was in ninth grade. Yeah. I remember.
Well, Michelle got an agent, and she was trying to get some movie parts. She wouldn't talk to anybody
I
in the
don't
family.
know what we did. I know Mom sent me, but Mom wanted to, I think, rent the house out, so she was packing up the house, and she sent me back to New York, and I lived with Lance for like a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did he take you to the La Mama Theater too?
No. We saw the first time the New York Dolls were playing. We went down to the Mercer Arts Center. I think I was like 15 or 16, 15 probably at the time. And then I came back. She had to move my horse to some other place. So Delilah, you helped her do that with Charlie.
So I was going into my senior year at Santa Barbara High School, and we were just sort of getting our legs back together with our friendships and the transition of what you do and where you go out, beyond high school. And I think Mom was trying to figure out if she would stay in Santa Barbara. And then financially, she realized she probably did need to sell the house and really take us to a bigger pond, so to speak. So the film crew literally disappeared. We heard nothing, right? I mean, maybe you guys heard. I just remember crickets. I don't remember anything specific in that year between production and when we got the press kit.
Well, I do remember that Alan and Susan had like a going away party. They had rented a little bungalow in Montecito, and they invited us over the day before they left and went back to New York. And I remember they had these things for us. And it illustrates my relationship with him of how confusing it was, because Alan said, here's this record, and he got me a record of, I think, The Flying Saucer Parts 1 and 2. It's a novelty record from the late 50s, early 60s. He said, I really want to hear what you think of this. And I kept thinking, is this a gift or is he lending this to me? And if he's lending it to me, how am I supposed to get it back to him? And it was very much what the relationship with them always was. Right. if they wanted something from you, it was because we were all friends. If you wanted something from them, sorry, that's business. We can't help you. We're not gonna. That's where we draw the line. Yeah. So there was no reciprocal kind of actual relationship ever going on with them, and I never really understood that until really that moment.
Do you guys, anyone else, Kevin or anyone, remember kind of that year period? Was it just kind of back to life as usual for the most part?
It was very much back to life. I mean, that was what, December 31st?
Yeah.
But also with the anticipation that this thing was going to come out, and all of a sudden we didn't really know what impact it would have. And
Mom would go back periodically and review footage, the edited footage. I think she went back twice. And she'd come back and we'd say, well, how did it look? And she'd say, well, it's coming together. And she was obviously very unsure of it. But, we'd say, so how was everything? Well, they took me to the Russian tea room, and I had a great dinner there, and then went to Elaine's for dinner. And, they did the whole...
the Oak Bar, Plaza Hotel.
The usual thing of just here, when you get somebody in from out of town, just, whirl them around, give them the smoke and mirrors tour, and then send them back home. And so...
But because Lance was based in New York, wasn't it Lance that went to see, some sort of a rough cut or something? And he had seen the title treatment, An American Family with the family shattered.
Right.
Hence the name UnShattered, folks, listening people. But I think that's when he called Mom and said, we've got something we got to talk about here.
Well, she also talks about that in her book, where she says, toward the end, they showed us the titles with how they would look at the beginning of each episode. American Family appeared and screened like China Breaking. And she didn't like that. She felt very upset by it. But then she said, the next time I came over to see it, Craig came behind me and put his hand over my eyes when the crackling credits came on. The message was, they're staying, honey. So let's hide your eyes because there isn't anything you can do about it. So that was one of like 4 or 5 different clues that we were all starting to get, that this partnership, this endeavor to do something new and exciting, us and them all together putting something brand new into the world, was starting to deteriorate and change drastically because we were no longer a part of the conversation with them. We were no longer contacted by them. We didn't have any contact with them at all. Yeah. So there was a silence that was deafening.
Yeah, I mean, it was what I've discussed before. It was the golden rule. We didn't understand it at that point in time, but they paid for it, and it was their product. They had all the shots they wanted, and they were going to market it just the way they wanted because they had the goal.
Yeah.
Right. And they had the contract.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then was there any prep you guys went through before the show aired, or what happened in kind of the lead up of the actual airing of the show? Nothing.
We didn't see really anything until, we had... A guy came out at one point to start assembling biographical material on each of us, and we had an interview with him for the press release and for the press packet. So we had those kinds of conversations, but still we didn't see anything. We didn't approve anything. We didn't know what was going to happen. We still did, at that point, probably didn't even really know what the premiere date was. So after,
I think they could have done a much better job prepping us because, I think that they got back there, they put the thing together. And what do they say? Bad news sells. No one wants to see some sort of good news story. And so, they got a marketing firm and they said, we're going to do a big negative spin on this whole thing. And had Craig flown out, sat down and said, hey guys, this is going to be a great project. Now we want to make sure we got people to see it. And so our marketing people advised that we have somewhat of a negative campaign on this whole thing, but it's not. I mean, you guys, he could have sold it and could have prepared us a lot better for it. But it was the golden rule. It was that they didn't even think they had to talk to us.
Right.
There was no desire to.
Yeah.
And that just left us out there really to react to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the media's perception of what we did, and that was a really shocking reaction and very painful for us. We were not prepared.
And they started letting off all of these dog whistles too.
Yeah.
Suddenly in Image magazine, which was one of the earlier publications for WNET, they had the famous Christmas picture of us, but it was kind of hand drawn. And then there's spider webs around it and cracks, and everybody's a little bit distorted and weird looking. And so, because that's where they kind of started laying some of the groundwork, saying this is, these people touch without meeting, meet without touching. We suddenly became these people to everybody. I won't see you if you don't see me is the family game. Why do they do it? Some explanations are obvious. Flattery, hopes of being discovered. It's like all of these things that had nothing to do with our intentions or our reasons for staying with it were now being circulated from WNET's publicity arm to the widespread media. And we started seeing some of this. And then in the Washington Post in December, early December, then John J. Iselin, who's the president of the company, he comes out and he says, these are damned attractive people who've come a long way, but aren't sure why. Lots of times they travel, and you get the feeling it's so they don't have to think. And so suddenly we're hearing from the head of the company that we've given our lives to, that these peopling us right to hell. That was a shock. And then after December rolls by, then we finally get to the press screening, and that's when it just exploded for me.
So, Grant, it sounds like these headlines were coming out, or these, kind of ideas from the press were coming out before the show even aired.
Correct.
Television critics had never seen anything like this.
Right.
So they didn't, they were doing their best to get their angry pen out and have the sharpest bite, so to speak, which they're really good at. So there was a lot of that. And that's what then kind of rallied our family once this started snowballing to the point where Mom was like, okay, we're going to get our show on the road. We are going to show to the best we can, control our media, and show who we are.
And I think I know the reason why we did that was not because we were trying to be famous.
No.
We wanted to say that...
It's the last thing.
We're not horrible.
We wanted to really say that the divorce and all this did not
Break
shatter us.
Yeah.
Well said.
We were together and strong. So I think I know that's why we went on Dick Cavett and we went on those shows, not because we were trying to capitalize on the fame, because none of us really wanted to be famous.
We just
go
wanted
into
to
this
show who
project
we
doing
were.
that.
So we did the Newsweek cover. We did Phil Donahue. We did Dick Cavett. We did some local, New York-based interviews. But
So-
we weren't trained for that either. We just went, hit your spotlight and go.
Yeah, let's back up real quick though. The press screening. So you've got there's a bunch of stuff coming out in the media before the show even airs that you're starting to get wind of, and it's feeling a little weird and like maybe not a good sign of what's ahead.
Mom's looking anxious. We don't have information. We're starting to get these little hints that what we had intended and what had been explained to us was no longer the case.
I remember Craig not returning her calls anymore.
That's probably, yeah.
So then when was the press screening, and just tell us about what that experience was like.
I didn't even know it was a press screening, to tell you the truth. I thought we were going down to a screening for us. And when we arrived at the screening room in Los Angeles, I don't remember where it was, but it was filled with, a bunch of people. Like I don't know what's going on here. And then we were kind of ushered into the center of this auditorium into seats sitting together. And then they filled in with all these other people who were obviously, television critics that had been invited to attend the screening and write about it. We were totally uninformed.
Yeah.
What was it like watching it then?
I remember walking in and sitting down.
Yeah.
And then I remember that whole theater went dark and we saw the American Family letters, and we were like, okay, this is great. And then they crack and they fall to the ground, and we're like, what?
Yeah.
It just seemed...
Yeah. No, then we're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
It was, to me, it was a slap in the face. It was a gut punch. It shocked me so much. And my immediate thought was, these aren't our friends. They fucking hate us.
Yeah.
They hate us.
I didn't think they really hated us. I thought they were trying to monetize the heck out of it.
Yeah, but I mean, okay.
They had no caring, no empathy, nothing.
Yes.
And I
call that hate, but yes, you're right.
It could be hate.
Monetized hate.
But you watch the series. It comes across as a loving family that cares about one another. They got issues. They're trying to deal with the issues. I thought that they really tried to project us in a very negative format, but I think because of the series and because of what we did, how we acted, it came through very positive. I mean, we got hundreds of letters from people, and I think maybe one or two were bad. I mean, they all were wonderful letters, supportive letters. Yeah. So the general population got the message. They got the message that, here is a family dealing with some real issues. They cared about one another, and they're trying to deal with it as best as possible. Yeah. The intellects back there in New York, they were just trying to put the biggest negative spin on it possible to try to sell as many seats as possible.
Yeah. Well, we had relatable issues that I think that the issues that we were going through were really relatable to a lot of families. And
And here's the deal about that, and that's where this gets very complicated, and you have to really be careful about how you explain the situation, because the film itself is not necessarily what we're really like, but what they have there is what happened. And I think the film does have value because of the way that a certain amount of the audience anyway reacted to it. They did say, I'm like that. That happened to me. I thought I was the only one. That stuff started coming into, certainly to Mom and Lance. And I know I got it. I know everybody got a certain amount of it, not as much as they did, but that was a real affirmation that what Craig's vision was correct. The problem that we had was the way in which they got people to watch was just cold-blooded. And they just threw us out into the sewer.
I mean, the whole point I thought was it was supposed to be observational documentary series, and it didn't end up that was being talked about, that art form itself. We were talked about.
Yeah, they never talked about us as being partners. They never talked about us as doing this experiment with them. They talked, suddenly we were there. These people, they just said they do it, and I'm shocked that they allowed us to do this. Yeah. It was like they I don't know why. Yeah. And then the other thing is that in the press release, they go on and on about the Heisenberg principle about, when you observe something, it changes and then they say, but it didn't matter. It's still valid. And then they say, camera changes what you would do in front of the camera because people will perform differently. And they say, yeah, but we've decided that didn't matter. So they deal with these questions in such a superficial way of saying, yeah, this is a real question about the integrity of this film, but we're just going to say it doesn't matter. And so there was no recourse for us to go to at all.
Yeah.
And their marketing campaign missed the real benefit of An American Family, which was people were tired of watching these sitcoms that were being aired on TV. They wanted to see real people dealing with real problems. And that was what American Family was about. And it was the biggest success I heard that WNET PBS had up to that date. A lot of people watched it, and it was because of that. And you go to this date, to today's era of real TV. Yeah, there are a lot of silly circumstances, but I think the basic premise is still the same. It's real people dealing with real problems. And WNET, all those guys totally missed it. They totally missed it,
Well, they had to sell it. But I also think that the press didn't know what to do with us because we were just these unexceptional people.
They'd never seen anything like it.
All of a sudden had 10 million viewers.
Well, I don't think it's so much that they didn't know what to do with us. It's that they took their lead from the press packet and from Craig Gilbert saying, these people, they're awful. I don't know.
Here's a press release. Here's the caption. Here's their headshot.
Run with it.
Run with it.
Yeah.
Instead of what the original concept was, which was every family has these sort of don't look at where they live and all that, but there are all these issues that these families have. But they didn't really...
They didn't follow that up at all.
They didn't follow it up at all. And so I think the reason why we say we're proud of it is because we do think that Craig did achieve that part of it. But then they followed up with this press kit and press people and didn't tell us very much until the film was aired.
Honestly, what we're most proud of is how it resonated with the people, the audience that viewed it,
Yeah.
the people that had similar family experiences or coming of age or whatever it was. And to this day, we still meet individuals that might be in their 50s and 60s or older that had seen the series, and they say, that touched my family, that touched me at a turning point in my life. No matter what, and that's what resonates with us through this whole entire experience.
Yeah, Mom's courage and Lance's courage. I mean, that meant so much to so many people, and that's one of the things that for the process of going through these conversations and looking back at some of the materials and what the media wrote about it, and in all the reams and reams of newsprint that were written about this thing, nobody ever said, "Is this of value? Is this worth 12 hours of your time?" None of them said, there's something here that we all need to watch. There's a reason for you to watch this. They all just looked at it as though it was just another traffic accident that you slow down for and rubberneck at until you passed by it. But nobody ever investigated that question.
Well, so there was already sort of maybe negative tinged press, at least from your guys' perspective, felt a little bit like things were getting personal.
Wait a second. Negative tinged. The silence of the louds becomes deafening. They roll forward through time, suffering like automatons. The silence of the louds is a scream, a genuine American tragedy. Their desolate, platitudinous lives. It goes on and on and on forever. A genuine American tragedy, a glimpse into the pit.
Yeah.
That's what we woke up to on day 2. I mean, essentially.
So it was immediate.
Yeah,
that was my question.
Yeah, it was a tidal wave. Yeah.
Like the show airs January 11, 1973, and immediately this is the reaction. This is kind of what's in the papers. But in the meantime, what's interesting is you're getting a very different message from people watching the show, right? Who are writing in.
It took a little time, but yes, it did come in, yeah.
The people that watched it, they understood what they were watching, and it was totally separate from the whole framing that PBS, WNET were trying to project the series in.
So how did it feel then to be the subject of all of this speculation and conversation?
Terrifying.
We were not.
It was
prepared.
betrayal. It was absolute betrayal.
And the other thing too, like we didn't go into this saying that we were going to be part of a 12-part series where my brother is gay and my mother and father going to get divorced. No, we consented to Craig Gilbert that we would do 2 weeks. And I don't think that reviewers understood that. They just thought, how would these people, why would these people expose their life like this? Who are they?
Yeah.
They're uninteresting. Are they
They'd
trying
never
to be
seen anything
famous?
like it.
They're not exceptional and they want to be famous, which, is so far from the truth of what we actually were trying to do. We were proud of our family and we wanted to say that divorce and these things shouldn't shatter a family.
And we were a private family until we agreed to do this. And we didn't realize it was going to generate 10 million viewers.
Right.
So,
I mean, I was trying to think today what it would have been like if it had never happened. It's like having a bad accident or something,
Like Dad said in the first episode where he talks about, and that's how you know you've been in a wonderful car wreck. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a wonderful car wreck because it was very painful. It was very hurtful. It still is. It's still something that we carry with us, but it has really informed our lives in a rich and interesting way. We've gone on to have good and successful personal and professional lives. So it's an interesting thing to have in your back pocket. But what would it have been like without it? I don't know.
But that was kind of like what families can do to support one another, and I think that that's how we just kept going.
Yeah.
it made us resilient, and I do think that the whole experience and the expose and the media blowback made us even tighter as a family.
For sure, yeah. And I think, Michelle, what you're saying just speaks to how impactful this shared experience was for you guys. It's not like some fun trip you just went on or something. But it was this thing that took up essentially 2 years of your guys' life as a family.
It's just like something that we will have to speak to until we die.
Right,
And, you
right.
know,
It's our legacy.
It's our
part of
legacy, and it is hard for people to understand, because even when I'm just at work and people ask me about it and I try to explain it, I can see their eyes glaze over, and it's just like, what? What was interesting about it, and what happened? And they, you know, it's just it's an odd experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't take much of that personally. The one thing I realized doing that was, if you're filmed for 300 hours, the editor could take pieces out of it. They could take bits and pieces, you not talking or not doing anything, and plug that in there. They can create your own character. Those characters were all created by Craig Gilbert back there in New York City.
The art of filmmaking, Kevin.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of that in it.
Enhanced.
I had no idea that you could do that till we went through that experience. But that was exactly what they did. They created all those characters that they wanted.
Well, in my research on some of the reviews that were written at the time, there was one that was particularly interesting about that. Abigail McCarthy in The Atlantic said, Gilbert's work is the work of an angry man. He says so. He was unhappy at the failure of his own marriage. He found his work unsatisfactory. Thus, he added to the purposes of the documentary the purpose of therapy for the filmmaker. And that's the only that's the only person I could find that ever said, you got to look past this and look at the creative mind behind it. It was very much him making real what he saw.
So then, Michelle, you mentioned, and Delilah, you alluded to this too, the chance for your family to respond to all of this, what was being said about you in the press, right? So tell us about how the appearance on the Dick Cavett show happened in February.
We used to watch Ed Sullivan all the time. Every Sunday, we couldn't wait to get to that TV set. So, you know, we were kids. We were like, sure, we're going to say, you know, we're going to go on Dick Cavett.
But was it that like these shows were now reaching out to you?
Yes.
Yeah. And we were de facto doing promotion for PBS, which we weren't hip enough to figure it out at the time. We were just trying to defend ourselves. And we continued to find, whether we were talking to a journalist or whether it was the Mike Douglas show or Dinah Shore or Dad and Lance went on Phil Don. You know, we were everywhere, but none of what we were saying was making any headway. We weren't changing anybody's perception or how they wrote about it. They stayed, you know, they would say, oh, listen, you guys are great. I don't know what the problem is. And then you read the next day, their story, and it would be the same thing that had come out, you know, weeks before. The same stuff about this empty family, and Pat drinks a martini and looks nervous, and the Louds don't talk, and there's a silence between them that's deafening, and all. It was this self-perpetuating prophecy. We couldn't beat it. By the time we got to Dick Cavett, I think we felt a little more confident. It was pretty early in the game. It was like mid-February. So there were only 4 maybe shows that had aired at that time.
And, you know, the thing is that for Dick Cavett to have us on his show, we were not writers or artists or entertainers or anything like that. But he said he did it because
It was the biggest ratings of his entire.
He had a lot of ratings, but you know, I was very disappointed because I really thought Dick Cavett was very open-minded and very witty and intellectual, and I thought it was going to be a great forum for us to kind of express our situation. But he already had his mind made up on us. There was a fairly negative picture. I thought, you know, he's terribly charming, very bright, very witty, and incredibly condescending, I thought.
Everybody looked down their nose at us.
Yeah.
And you know, and
uncomfortable with Lance too. He really didn't know what to do.
Right.
You know, he looked down on Lance, and and Lance knew it. He could sit there and he knew it.
But you know, we played on that show. Lance had this kind of, that band I played in, it was a forerunner for the Bumps, and you know, it was very exciting. I still remember going out on stage and we played this one song. It starts with the bass feedback, and so I got my back to the audience and I hit the bass guitar and I got the feedback going, and there's a tremendous roar and applause and scream, and I thought, oh my God, this is like the Beatles playing on the Ed Sullivan show. And I turned around and looked, and it was all these guys yelling at Lance. All these guys yelling at Lance and screaming at Lance. And I was kind of shocked for a minute, but then I thought, you know, it's better to have somebody appreciate your music than nobody. So we went with it, baby.
And I remember...
I can attest to that from my song that I did later. So I know exactly what the silence sounds like.
When we left, when the show was over and they said you can either go out the side door, door, you can take out this other door.
This was the funnest part of this whole experience.
Wasn't it great?
This moment, yeah.
Yeah. And Dad just said, this is probably the only time anyone's going to ask for your autograph. And we're like, let's go. Yeah. Remember that?
Well,
Yeah, the page was
Dad-
saying, listen, they're crazy. The street's filled with people. You can't go out there. We'll bring a car to the front, and then we'll get you out of
This is
here
Midtown
quickly.
Manhattan, by the way.
And it's like 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. And he's saying, and my dad said, what's the problem with going out the back door? Let's see what they want. And typical of
thought-
Bill Loud, he wanted the full ride.
Yeah, I thought he said there's thousands of people waiting out there for us.
Yeah.
And the guy says, yeah. He goes, open that door.
Yeah.
So then what was that
Remember.
experience like?
It was the Beatles.
Oh,
it was
wow.
as close as we'll ever get anyway. It was hundreds of people. And the funny thing about it is that they were all holding this New York Times piece by Anne Royfi that just rakes us over the coals. And they all want us to sign it. And they're all, they're adoring, they're friendly, they're positive, they're laughing, they want to talk to you, they want to shake your hand, they want you to sign the thing. And we're all just like, what? It was the most psychedelic possible
It was
experience
a rock star
you can imagine.
moment. Yeah.
But that's like that endorsement of there's no such thing as bad news. As long as they're talking about you, it's all good.
Yeah.
And these people, they didn't really make their opinion up about us. I mean, they were excited to see us. They wanted our honor. They didn't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I signed a bunch of autographs as I was going out there. And I thought, this is going to end up in the trash bin tomorrow morning. It's sure is fun tonight.
Did it feel at all like gratifying to feel like, oh wow, there's all these people who are watching the show clearly and are fans of it?
I don't think we took it that cerebrally. I think we just said this is
fun.
Finally, there's something fun about this.
Yeah.
And we were not unhappy people. Even though the series had aired, we were still having fun.
And I think we felt good that we connected with, the audience that was there for the Dick Cavett show. And that then was a reflection of the overall audience across America that was tuning in. So that gave us an amount of courage and pride that we had participated and that we had some sort of little bit of control over the messaging.
It was the only nice moment that we had with the audience. And we all kind of scattered and got separated and stuff. And so it's this February night in New York. It's 11 o'clock or midnight or something. And Kevin and the guys got a ride back to the hotel. I don't know what happened to everybody else. But I had my guitar with me because I'd played my little song on the show. And we all got separated, and I finally found myself alone. I was like on somewhere in the mid-50s someplace. It started to rain, and I had this New York Times thing saying, maybe, just maybe he'll be a good man. I'm like 17, 18 years old. It was the most bizarre experience to have this fame, this celebrity, and I don't have cab fare to get back to the hotel. I got to walk back to the hotel. So it's like, I got to walk 30 blocks to the hotel in the rain at night in February. It's like 40 degrees. It's just like, that was the whole experience of American Family to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's an important point because I don't think that any of us thought that we could use the series to advance our lives. We knew that this was just a one-time deal. And
well, we kept
wasn't gonna
getting,
do anything
people
for
kept
us.
accusing us, and certainly me, because I wanted to be a performer. But I was very conscious from the earliest days that I didn't want to be associated. I didn't want to be a Partridge Family guy. I wanted my own thing. I was waiting to get out of the house and start my own thing. So the prospect of being tied into the family and this brand was terrifying to me. It was the absolute opposite of what I was hoping to do.
I mean, and that's what Lance was saying on the Dick Cavett show,
Yeah.
too. He just wanted to make some money somehow. He referred to the apartment that he was living in, and I would like to live somewhere better and make a little money. That wouldn't be bad. But it's also, too, the questions that Dick Cavett asked him were not very good.
Yeah.
So
He's so uncomfortable during that whole interview. He just doesn't really know what to say. And then Lance does this thing where it's kind of like punching water. You can't connect with him. And so whatever Cavett says to him, Lance has an easy way out that won't allow him to get any kind of control over the conversation or control over him.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't like that because he's starting to look bad too. And Lance is just doing what he does.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Well, I
it
thought
was
Lance's
masterful.
line about became harder to swallow put Dick Cavett in a very difficult position.
Yeah.
Dick Cavett
masterful.
did not
Yeah.
knew how to handle that line.
Okay. Cut to commercial.
He wasn't expecting to elicit that type of response.
So then when you guys were getting invited to Dick Cavett and some of these other shows to respond, it sounds like for the most part those conversations didn't necessarily go that well either. Is that a fair
I don't
statement?
know. Dinah Shore, I thought we did. Yeah, I didn't do it, but Dinah Shore was a very positive conversation.
It was a freak show. I mean, they were nice to us. Correspondents and media writers too. They were all nice to us when we were with them, but we were like these freaks. What do we do with these freaks? I mean, you can't talk about their book, or you can't talk about what they do or what they create or it's just this weird thing that's happened to them, and nobody knew how to address it. And getting back to the value of the series again, nobody was willing to say, this moved me because this happened to me. And it was only with the public and our connection with the public that supported us with so much love and affection over the years that we really did get a sense of pride in our participation of the series.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things I thought the press really missed on the whole thing was it had a tremendous viewership. No one tried to explore why did American Family resonate like that. No, there was no questions,
Yeah.
Why do you think when we were on Dick Cavett, I think the only person that scored higher than us was John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
Yeah.
But tremendous response, and they had us on. And it was reality TV in its newest and rarest form, and no one recognized it or understood it, and no one tried to. That's what they should have been trying to do.
That's exactly right. That's a really good point.
Well said.
Nobody looked further than that. Nobody said, what is happening here?
Mm-hmm.
What do we learn from this? What do we need to know about this?
Yeah.
Nobody asked.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting because you have on one side, these different outlets reaching out to you guys, but in a way, maybe to get their own ratings up, right? Like what Kevin was mentioning. But then you guys are participating because you're wanting a chance to defend yourselves or speak for yourselves for
Yes.
once, right? So there's kind of an interesting dynamic going on there. Like, how did this all end up resolving? Like, how did the media frenzy go away?
We just stopped answering the phone, essentially.
And never resolved. It just ran its time. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no
Ran its
resolution.
course
There was
till
no
the next. Yeah.
there was no final discussion about it. No final interview. I mean, Craig had made promises to us. We were going to get the outtakes and we are going to get all this and that type of stuff. They reneged on everything. Of course, we were naive. We didn't put anything in writing. Right. So they reneged on absolutely everything. They created the most toxic relationship possible with their talent. You look at it from a business point of view, it was the biggest mishandling of anything I've ever seen, the way they handled that.
In her book, mom writes about getting a letter from a woman that worked in the WNET publicity department saying, I quit my job because of how they're handling this publicity on you guys. I can't stand it. It's sickening to me. And so she quit.
And they also had like 8 editors. Craig kept going through editors, and a lot of them had reached out to Mom or Lance and just said, we were not happy with the way they were editing the film. So they they voiced their opinion and they were fired. So he went through like 8 or 9 editors in making the film.
Well, it's the difficult part about this is because when this tidal wave hit us, we lashed out at Craig, and he felt betrayed by us. So suddenly he was the one that was isolated and being criticized by us, and felt that it was unfair and that he had done everything. But in all of his writings and interviews, in all the 50 years in between, I mean, he never admitted to the fact that he essentially conned us into doing this 12-part series. He never admitted to the fact that he had promised us, we're not going to do any publicity that you're going to be ashamed of. We're going to be very careful with this. We're going to be very delicate with this. We understand how personal this stuff, that went out the window. All of these things that he promised us were gone, and he kind of disappeared from the scene. And then you would read these interviews over the intervening 50 years where he'll say, I'm still trying to work it out. Well, he never contacted us to say, let's work this out. Let's talk about what happened.
He never talked to us about, this is where we're going with the story.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? I mean,
Right.
what points do you think we should bring out? There was no partnership in the whole development of that whole thing. And then when it was in the process, did we hear anything from the Raymonds? They disappeared.
Yeah.
I never heard anything. I mean, they were our good friends. They were back there. They were seeing what was going on. Did they
But
alert
they
us
sort
to
of
anything?
then started taking, because Craig sort of disappeared, they started taking credit for everything. It couldn't have been done without them. Every picture of an American family, it's just of a mom, Alan, and Susan, and it's just, that's American Family.
Yeah.
Right there.
When they did with Alan, they hired Alan to do the 90-minute cut down 10 years ago after Cinema Verite, something that they wanted to sell on Amazon. And you look at the cover of that, it's a picture of the house, and it's a picture of Alan Raymond.
Yeah.
There's nothing, no louds there.
Yeah.
Hey, when they were done with that, did we get a thank you note from PBS? Did we
They
get any
never
type?
thanked us.
Nothing.
No. They
We
wouldn't
got
even give us a
nothing.
series.
Oh my God.
Well, they were supposed to give us a copy. What she's saying is that they were supposed to give us a copy of it for us to have, and they never did that.
They
And there's
didn't even give us a copy of the whole
yeah.
thing.
And so years later, when we were approached by both WNET in particular and PBS as a network to participate in a 50th anniversary, I just said, well, why? Why would we do that with you? Why would we do anything with you guys? I said, we want to talk about it. We'd love to have our voice involved in the legacy of this piece. We have a lot to say about it, but what on earth could make us want to partner up with you guys again? And they didn't have an answer, and that was pretty much the end of any conversation we had.
Well, on that note, I'm curious for you guys then, having had such a crazy experience with the taping of the show, but especially with the media reaction after, does it give you guys a certain perspective on entertainment or media, having
what
gone
not
through
to
what
do.
you did? Yeah. Just do you look at things differently because of your experience? I'm curious.
Just when you're interviewed, you'd really know that you have no control over what anybody's going to say about you or think about you. So when people approach us now, we just say no, because it just doesn't seem
We're
to really...
we're head shy.
Yeah,
we're head shy.
They're just looking for a line. They're just looking for some sort of line that they can sell on the whole thing. I mean, the thing I learned, you go out with these people, they're very nice, they relate to you, and they have a bunch of drinks, you'd have a bunch of drinks, and then we'd write up the article, they'd mention all the drinks you were having, but none of the drinks they were having.
Yeah, the perspective is really that we're proud that we showed people that there are elements in families that are difficult to deal with, and we're all still alive and healthy and happy. I mean, these are just part of families.
Yeah.
I think it's really dangerous, the era that we live in, when every movie you see and every TV series you see says, based on a true story, this is their story, this is a true story. It's not. It's somebody telling you where to look. And if you don't engage your analytical mind, you're just a pawn. So you need to look at this stuff not as though it's all a grand conspiracy, but you need to look at it further than what is just being shown
On
to
the
you.
surface,
Or else you're
yeah.
just a passenger in this on the ride.
Well, we're gonna dig a lot more into that in our next conversation. We talk a little bit about the lasting legacy of the show and what was the point of all of this and some of the takeaways and all of that. But this has been a great conversation, much that you guys have been through. So thanks for sharing. Any last thoughts before we wrap up on this media topic?
We could go on about this particular thing for a long time.
Yeah.
There's a
Really hit a
lot.
hot button,
I got
so-
pages here that Michelle's got pages here. She hasn't read. Delilah's got a whole manila folder. She hasn't even opened yet. We could go, baby. We
Two
can
words.
play.
Stay tuned.
I think I got through a lot
More
of mine.
later.
More later.
Yeah, it was an experience. It was
Yeah.
big. There's something that is really constructive about the series. There's something really destructive about how it was presented and how they handled it.
Well,
Okay.
on that note, great one to end on. There's more to come.
Yes.
Thank you.
More to come. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina.
Thanks for
Thank you.
Thanks,
sharing.
Kev.
Thanks,
Live on
extras.
American Family, I say.
Yes. Loud Family Unshattered was produced by Grant Loud, Tina Lee, and Ben Davidson. Music by David Poe. Find more at davidpoemusic.com. Special thanks to Harry Friedman and Cole Kuntz. This has been a Magnus et Superbus production.